start with the workshop. All right, cool. So let's talk about React. I would like to show how to pass the data up and down between components. This is vital if you want to create complex functions and complex logic with React. We need to learn how to bind components in React. I would like to present two possible scenarios. How to bind data when we have a stateful component or a class component, and how to bind data when we have a stateless component. Yeah? I'd like to present both scenarios. So what we got today? We got a very simple React application with nothing in it. So as usual, first of all, let's get rid of the sample code. So let me get rid of the HTML bit. So, and now let me display hello, something like that, just to make sure that the server is responding. It's a bit small, but I hope you agree with me, it works fine, right? Cool. So look at what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a new component, a stateful component. And I would like to call the component, so for instance, the functionality I want to build is, I want to check your mood. How do you feel today? So when talking about stateful components, are we talking about classes or functions? That's correct. So class, mood, and then if you remember when we declare a new class in React, we type extends react.component. Yeah? That's the way you set up a new class component in React. So now the next question is, how can we display something as part of that component? What's the method that enables UI rendering in React stateful components? Wrong. If I want to display hello, render, that's correct. That is, so render, yeah. And now, what else? That's correct, return, and then we can display hello, yeah, something like that. Well, let me change the message here. So, will the hello piece of text be displayed on the screen? Yes or no, and why? No. Correct. Correct. Look, we created a class, move, but then what? So this is our main component, right? app.js. Is that component invoking the mood component? Is it linking? No, it's not, right? They are completely disconnected. So how do we render the mood component here? Like a tag, right? Like an HTML tag. All right. So, does it work? Yep. It does work, right? So, we are already binding the app component, stateless function, with the mood component, stateful, a class. So, I would like to set hello Peter, hello John, hello Elana, hello Darius. So, let's learn how to pass data top to bottom. We can add an attribute here. We can call it however you want. I would like to call it name for semantics reasons. And now I'll pass a value, Peter, for instance. So how do we display hello and then the name of the user that we are providing? Props, like that. And then what else? Import the props. How do you import the props? There is no constructor. You don't really need a constructor here. Okay, in curly braces. That's correct, Darius. So that's the way you can bind a property of the parent component. Why name? Well, because we call it name, right? If we rename it to Brexit, and we call it Brexit. Yeah. So let's see if it works. All right, it throws an error. Props is not defined. Why is that? Well, it makes sense. Props is a variable, but that variable is not declared at all. So what are we missing here? The point is, whenever you deal with stateful components, like a class, if you want to refer to the props, you always have to prefix this. I'm sure you typed that already 2 million times. This.props.name. Yeah, that's the way it works. And when you do that, there you go. You got the hello Peter. And of course, that's dynamic. So if I put Elana, it will display hello Elana. Yeah. So that's the way you can pass data from top to bottom. And now let's make it a bit more difficult. What happens if it's on the other way around? Let me give you an example. I want to display a button. Yeah. So the user will be able to click on the button, and the button title is check my mood today. So now, whenever we click on the button, I want to send a message to the parent. Yeah? And the parent will display something. Yeah? So how do we do that? Well, the very first thing we need to do is to type onClick. Yeah? That's the way you can capture the click event. Be careful with a capital C. Yeah? OnClick, capital C. In JavaScript, in vanilla JavaScript, it's all written in lower cases, but here you got capital C. All right, onClick equals. Let's pay attention to the syntax because that's a bit controversial. I can pass a function like this one, and then inside of the function, I can display something. I feel good. Alert is a built-in pop-up in JavaScript. It will display a message, a very annoying and noisy message in the middle of the screen. Yeah? So look at the syntax. That's the way the mood component can just show some sort of message to the user. Let's see if that works. You see? Check my mood today. Here you go. You cannot read the screen, probably, but it says, I'm good. Yeah? So that's okay. That proves the click event works. But I told you before that I didn't want to do that here. I did want to display the message from the parent component. So we can do something quite interesting. Look, we can pass another attribute, and then we can call it however we want, like on button clicked. And now it's pretty much the same. So I want to pass the message from here to there. So it will be the app component, the responsible of displaying something. Yeah? So how do we do that? Well, here we can type this.props. Can you figure out what are we missing here? That's correct, Darius. On button click. And now we can display whatever message we want. Like, hello, Darius. Yeah? So now, whenever we click on the button, we will be sending a message to the parent component, and then that guy, that component, will be responsible of dealing with that message. But obviously, we're passing a message here, right? Hello, Darius. How can we capture that message and how can we display it on the screen? Can you figure out? This is a function, right? So because that's a function, whatever we pass here will be captured here. That's the argument of our function. So then we can just display the message. Yeah? So hello Darius, that's the argument, goes here, and then we can display an alert, we can do a console log, we can do whatever we want with it, right? Let's see if it works. You see, it works, hello Darius. It's the same, but I hope you get the difference. So now the mood component is not responsible of displaying. It doesn't really know, that component doesn't really know what are we going to do with that message. His main and only responsibility is to send that piece of text to the parent. And then we are delegating into the parent the responsibility of dealing with that message. Any questions? No? Cool. So that's the way you can double bind a React component. First of all, you can pass data top to bottom. Yeah? This is the process name, no problem at all. And then you can return data using a callback function. So whenever you want to pass data from a child component, mood, to a parent component, app, you always need this structure. You need to call a function. So whenever the function is invoked, then we'll deal with the data. All right, so that's the classic way of binding components. I would like to comment that piece of code, and I would like to rewrite the very same thing using a stateless component, which is a function. You will see it's slightly simpler. So, to create a stateless component, just type function, mood, it's just a JavaScript function, right? And now, let me copy the return statement. Yeah, and of course, let's look after indentation a bit. For readability purposes, something like that. So, just as it is at the moment, do you think that will work?
No,
We need to what? Let's try it, right? Oops, look at the error. Cannot read property props of undefined. Cannot read property props of, undefined. In other words, this is undefined. And the reason is, the weird this prefix only makes sense when working with classes. If we work with stateless components, aka functions, they don't really make sense. So we get rid of them. That's the first thing. But anything else? Where is props coming from? Will it work if I rename it to people or to Brexit? I mean, why props? That's correct, Darius. So when dealing with functions, we pass the props here on the argument of the function. Look at the syntax. It's just slightly different, yeah? But it's the equivalent. With a class, we don't pass anything, and we refer to the bindings using these dot props. With a function, we don't use this, but we have to pass the props. So these two components, in theory, are now fully equivalent. They do literally the same thing. Let's see if that's true or not. It is true. Yeah? It's essentially the same code. And I hope you agree with me that code is slightly simpler than that code. Why? I mean, just compare line by line, right? So the declaration of the component is much simpler. then you don't have to deal with that render method, whatever that means. Then you don't have to deal with this dot blah, 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 blah. Yeah, does it make sense? One more thing. So this is a common scenario. You receive props, and then you do props.name, props.age, props.email, whatever. Yeah? Let me show you a trick about JavaScript. So let me open my DevTools. So imagine I have a variable called letUser equals name Peter age 21. So now if I want to display the details of the user, I can do letName equals user.name. And then I can do letAge equals user.age. Easy, right? And of course, so now I can do console.log name age, something like that, right? So let's see if that works. Here you go. Name Peter, age 21. That's okay, don't get me wrong, that's fine. However, there is a way to simplify these two lines. That's what we call in JavaScript object destructuring. That's a new technique. Because here we got two properties, but what happens if we got, instead of 2, 4? Email address, surname, you know, we can have multiple properties about the user, right? So, with JavaScript, we can replace these two lines with this structure. You see? So that structure is equivalent to these two lines. And the way we read it is, we're creating two variables. First of all, name and user, which is literally the same thing we did here. And what's the name of the name variable? The value of the name variable is the value of the name property here. Yeah? So whatever the value is, Peter, it will be assigned to the name variable. And what's the value of the user variable? It's the same thing. The value of the user variable will be whatever the value. Sorry, I typed user, that's wrong. What should I put here? Age, sorry, that was my fault. So what's the value of the age variable? The value of the age variable will be whatever the value of the age property is here. Yeah, so it's name-based mapping under the hood. And if we run this piece of code again, as you can see, it returns the same. So that still works. It's a way to simplify your life a bit. And why am I referring to that pattern? Because if I go back to my code, rather than typing props, you can do something very sexy. Look, you can use curly braces, and now you can destructure the properties. Why we do that? Because now we don't have, sorry, it was not name and age, obviously. It's name and on button click, yeah? All right, so once we do that, boom. We don't have to refer to props anymore. You will find out it's a bit stressful. Props.name, props.age, props.email, props. all the time. There is no value on typing props. all the time. So thanks to object destructuring, we can simply refer to the variables that we want to deal with. So if we go back to the browser, let's see if it works. So let me refresh, so just give me a second. So, all right, let's see if it works. Here you go, still works, right? So that's pretty much it. Do you have any questions? Elana? Which style do you prefer, Elana? Do you prefer the stateless or function components or stateful/class components, and why? Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's simpler, right? Yeah, I completely agree with you. Even though, I'll tell you something, I never use classes anymore. So whenever I have to create a component, I always do that, right? However, I think it's important still to at least understand how classes work. Why? Because imagine that tomorrow you are working for a company and they have some legacy code. Yeah? They will have lots of classes, so you'll have to deal with them. The new stuff, it will be created using functions, for sure. But the old legacy stuff is likely to follow this style. So it's good to be familiar with it. What about you, Darius? What are your thoughts about stateful versus stateless?
So I tried both, and actually made some of the tests.
Mm-hmm.
I just transferred them to stateless.
Yeah.
And it's like half of the code.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, so the code looks simpler for sure. If it helps, this summer we ran a big coding challenge with 45 senior React developers in London. Literally nobody used classes. Everybody used functions. Yeah? So what the senior developers in London are doing tells you what the trend is. Any questions? Anything else? Yeah. So historically speaking, and when I mean historically speaking, that was since 2014 to a few months ago, classes were more powerful. So I refer to classes as stateful components, and I refer to functions as stateless. So whenever you wanted to hold a state, you needed to use classes. So the complex components were created with classes because that was the only way you could deal with some operations, like calling the backend, dealing with the user events, things like that. Yeah. These function components were still useful for simplistic things, but talking about the complexity, it was all written with classes. However, something happened at the beginning of the year. So React added a new thing. So do you remember, does any of you know what's the new technique in React that enables big power on stateless components? No. It's about hooks. Yeah? So hooks, it goes beyond the scope of this session, but because everybody realized that that code is simpler than that code, yeah, the React community made some efforts to make sure that you can have all the power of stateful components in stateless components. And that's why they introduced hooks. So in other words, today, you can do everything using stateless components, using functions. Yeah? That's why I don't really see the point of using that structure beyond the scope of maintaining legacy code. Yeah? It's not realistic to think that all your legacy components are going to be migrated from stateful to stateless. Yeah? Anything else?
Just a question, maybe a bit off topic, but can we destructure the, let's say the class, destructure the props.
Yeah, you can destructure the props.
Can we do it possibly? Does it make any sense to do it in a function before render?
Before render, well, if I will have to deal with this code and I want to destructure name and on button click, you can do something like that. Look, let name, comma, on button click equals what? Can you complete this line? That's it. that means A, go to the props, give me the name property, and save the value here. And likewise, give me the on button click property and save the value here, right? So now, after doing this, look, pop, we can get rid of any reference to this.props. So let's run it. And it's still working, of course, right? So that's the way I will destructure my props. You don't need a constructor, Darius. You don't need to do anything complicated. Just before returning, before displaying your HTML, your visual interface, here you can run whatever you need. You can set up, you can prepare your UI a bit. Yeah? Does it make sense? Cool. Anything else, Alana? We are doing the same for Stateless,
Yes.
but it's essentially the same thing, but on the Stateless, we are destructuring everything here straight away. Of course, if you don't like that, you can pass props, and then that's equivalent. Yeah, but what's the point, right? What's the point of injecting props to then the structure? Why don't we inline everything, right? But technically speaking, it's all good. It's the same. Don't go crazy with object destructuring. If you don't feel comfortable with it, don't use it, right? If you don't feel comfortable, just do that. That's all good. Eventually, you'll get tired of typing that much. And by natural interest, you'll make an effort to destructure the variables. Yeah? But that's fine, no problem at all. Cool. So, anything else? No? All right. So that was it, guys. Thank you for watching.